aftermath, and plenty of unsolicited advice.
We're going to rebuild this devastation. It's going to have to be billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. And the only way that's going to come from is from Washington. And it didn't come 28 years ago, and I doubt if it comes now.
Tonight, lessons from past racial unrest and how the LA riots played in Pretoria, Beijing, and other foreign capitals.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ed Koppel.
Among the costs of the Los Angeles riots that no one has as yet calculated is the loss in U.S. prestige. There is, after all, scarcely a corner of the world so remote that it does not receive instantaneous satellite transmissions from the United States. And particularly in those countries that resent America's strength and its claims to global leadership, there is a certain glee, what the Germans call Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in someone else's misfortune. Washington does, after all, take pride in holding other governments to the high moral, legal, and human rights standards that the United States claims as its own. It was probably to be expected, then, that other governments, which have bridled under U.S. criticism, would relish turning things around. What other countries are saying about what happened in Los Angeles is not necessarily fair. It's going to make a lot of you angry. But if you're wondering how others see us these days, here are several brief updates from ABC News correspondents stationed around the world.
The Israelis have been fighting the Palestinian uprising for more than 4 years and are now watching with interest how their often critical American friends handle disturbances of their own. The riots in Los Angeles received extensive coverage here, just at a time when the Israeli army was fending off charges that it was following a shoot-to-kill policy against protesters.
Perhaps an Israeli would be justified telling his well-intentioned American friend, come off it. We both got problems.
In Iraq, the government, which has repeatedly been condemned by the United Nations, quickly called for a Security Council debate on the Los Angeles disturbances. Libya's Muammar Gaddafi said the verdict in the Rodney King trial proves that the 2 Libyans accused in the Lockerbie bombing would never get a fair trial from an American jury. And Iran's supreme religious leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, said the Los Angeles uprising, as he put it, shows that the United States has no business pointing its finger at others.
The leader refuted Washington's claim to be the forerunner of human rights in the world, as millions of Americans have been deprived of their basic civil rights in the U.S. society.
There is a lot of smirking now in the Middle East, as the nation, which people here call the world's policeman, has to deal with trouble in its own front yard.
This is Todd Carroll. China has reported the rioting in Los Angeles to make a case to its people that there are violations of human rights in the United States, and ask what right America has to act as the world's human rights policeman. One newspaper said the riots showed the hypocrisy of democracy and the morbid state of American society. The reports created a chilling sense of an American city under siege.
I know it is controlled by the army, so it is really dangerous, of course.
已经使这个城市面貌全非。
Television news ran factual reports stressing the victimization of blacks, then took more potshots at racism in America. The Chinese want to deflect criticism of their own extensive violations of human rights, perhaps believing that images of National Guard troops moving into Los Angeles neighborhoods are somehow equivalent to the Chinese Army's massacre of peaceful protesters in Beijing, or that the brutality of the Rodney King beating might somehow offset China's systematic beating and persecution of Tibetans who have agitated for independence. One difference is that this footage was never shown on Chinese television.
This is Don Platt Strip in South Africa, where racial violence and tensions between the police and community are not the exception, but the norm. People are used to riots, used to running battles with police, used to death. But when they saw it happen in Los Angeles, they were shocked.
I've seen that racism is still there in America.
Yeah, I didn't think something like that could happen over there. I thought it was only something that, we saw here in South Africa, not over there.
Commentators played the story straight, as did most newspapers, though one asked, how many times has the United States, that paragon of virtue, read us the Riot Act on civil rights and treatment of blacks? It should clean up its own backyard before it tries to clean up ours.
It's a terrible letdown, really, for people who have held up America as a land of freedom and the land of democracy, to see this kind of thing.
For some, however, it is cold comfort. Now we know, said one person, that this kind of violence doesn't only happen in South Africa.
This is Jerry King in Berlin. German TV had planned to lead with domestic news, a major national strike. The riots changed that.
Ausnahmezustand in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles overshadowed everything when the rioters hit the streets.
People looked at it incredibly to see Los Angeles, an American city, like a war zone.
According to one newspaper, this was hatred in America. It looked like Kuwait on fire. It disturbed Germans.
We thought America is a state of freedom and it's a real revolution,
Several commentators warned that Germany, with its widening social divisions, must learn from L.A.
We were just shown pictures which frighten me. Anger and hatred are breaking loose in a society which is similar to ours.
His conclusion? Los Angeles is not very far away. And it certainly was not very far from the minds of these young Germans taking part in the traditional May Day march here.
This
is David Ensor in Moscow. Russians have seen the same pictures Americans saw of what Russian television calls the calamity in the United States. But the sharpest comments are in the print media. Several newspapers using the riots as grist for America bashing Cold War style. The newspaper Izvestia wrote, in America, they still lynch Negroes. Said Sovietskaya Rossiya, the American melting pot is just propaganda, a myth.
They want to stress the ills of the capitalist society, especially in the United States, which many democratic newspapers portray now as an example we all have to follow.
Halfway around the world from Los Angeles, in the ex-Soviet Republic of Tajikistan, anti-government demonstrators were warned by the regime, stop your protest or we will use Los Angeles measures against you. For those opposed to reforms here, the News from America provides a political opportunity, a chance to argue that democracy American style is no model for Russia. I'm David Ensor for Nightline in Moscow.
When we come back, we'll take a look at the lessons of racial unrest from the past. But first, when we return, we accompany President Bush as he ventures into urban America for a survey of the damage in Los Angeles.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Jeep, a division of the Chrysler Corporation.
In high school, Sharon Simpson used to call me Pinhead. So at the 10-year class reunion, I drive up in my New Eagle Talon TSI all-wheel drive.
And what did she say?
Nice car, Pinhead.
My big brother says his Eagle Talon has 195 horses under the hood.
Oh, so you're looking for the horsies?
No, I'm checking out the intercooled turbocharger.
Presenting the faucet. Funny thing about faucets, you might think they're all the same until you look into a Price Vista faucet. Price Vista faucets are, in a word, fabulous. Since they have a hard and solid brass, the fact is they hold up better and longer. No fooling. Nice, too. They're affordable. So when you're faced with getting a faucet, get a Price Vista, the fabulous faucet with the funny name.
This might look like a typical light beer, and some typical skiers enjoying a typical day on the slopes. But this is no typical run.
Well, I know you're all bubbling with excitement. Any questions?
And this doesn't taste like a typical light beer, because this is cold-filtered Miller Genuine Draft Light. so there's nothing typical about it.
私たちは92.3は嫌いですね。
大変騒がしい音楽ですね。この音楽はまるで二人の神様が大合戦中のようですよ。
大変な笑い声が聞こえますね。
私たちにはどうしてこんなことをやるのかわかりませんよ。
Burning, searing.
Made me think I was having a heart attack.
But for millions, it's heartburn. How you can put out the flames on 2020 Friday.
It was a day of discovery for George Bush. The president, who has been criticized for being out of touch with urban America, got a first-hand look at the destruction in Los Angeles. Still, as Jackie Judd reports, interaction with the victims was limited.
President Bush saw up close, but not very personal, the devastation of South Central Los Angeles. City leaders were his guide through the day. Some business people shared stories about the loss of their livelihoods, and apparently the president had a sympathetic ear.
He said he would definitely put on his agenda to come back again.
And if he forgets, you're supposed to send him a note.
I'm supposed to send him a note if he forgets. I hope he gets the note.
The president! But the people who live in these neighborhoods didn't get near the president. They stood on the sidelines with more than a little skepticism.
And at first come words, then comes action. It took for our community to get the story for him to come down here.
The White House insists the trip here was not a political visit for the president. Still, appearances like this one with local police have become regular features of the Bush campaign. It didn't go unnoticed or unappreciated by the police commander.
Press has taken a pretty good heyday on beating us up for the last few days, so it's kind of nice to hear somebody in charge say something nice about all the hard work that a lot of good police officers have done.
Let us pray. All wise and eternal God.
Later at a church, Mr. Bush seemed moved by the destruction he had earlier seen.
And we are our brother's keeper. Not to keep him back, not to keep him down, but to keep him well and to keep him safe and to give him a shot at the American dream.
Outside the church, a moment of unbridled emotion, unseen and unheard by the president.
Him and Reagan are the ones that caused this. Then they're gonna come down here and see and tell you guys how he's gonna make it better. He's gonna make it better. And what he's gonna do, he's gonna do what he's been doing for the last 4 years, nothing but making it worse.
Hispanic leaders, including City Councilman Mike Hernandez, say that a great untold story about the '92 riots is how much their community suffered. There are estimates that 40% of the property and businesses destroyed were Hispanic-owned.
You had a mini mall across the street that's been destroyed all around. You have this corner destroyed. So you have 3 intersections destroyed, and in between the blocks we have destruction. So it's going to take major rebuilding.
A mile from here and a world away in the elegant Bonaventure Hotel, Hispanic business leaders gathered to meet Mr. Bush.
I will tell him that here stands before you a product of the Great Society. I was educated as a result of it. I started working in my community as a result of it. And there's good things that happened through the war on poverty, things that some of which continue to be implemented even during his watch.
A few pictures were allowed before the group went behind closed doors. At its end, Lizarraga was pleased. No promises, he said, but some honesty.
I was really heartened by the fact that we had a president who said, you know what, I don't have the answers. I need help.
Back in the neighborhood of Pico and Alvarado, Councilman Hernandez presumes that he and other elected Hispanics weren't invited to the Bush meeting because they're Democrats. And he's afraid the president will go away hearing only part of the story.
He's not going to hear what's going on in the inner city. He's not going to hear about the lack of schools. He's not going to hear what's happening in the day-to-day lives of people. He's not going to hear that people don't get the types of services that normally Americans take for granted.
There was a time when this neighborhood was prosperous, a fashionable address. Ronaldo Rodriguez, an auto mechanic and 20-year resident, has seen it go downhill. and he would have liked to have told the president about it.
Poverty is number one factor, and secondly, people around here, you know, seem not to care anymore what the American dream is all about. And for one thing for sure, I guess there is no more American dream anymore.
That sort of despair followed Mr. Bush almost everywhere today, with only occasional expressions of hope. It was the Rodney King verdict that unleashed all of this. The verdict is still out on the success of the president's efforts here.
You know, he made us feel good, but I haven't heard the specific. I don't hear a plan. I don't hear the timeline. I don't hear the blueprint. And until we have that, it's nice to feel good, and we certainly all need that.
This is Jackie Judd for Nightline in Los Angeles.
When we come back, a look at this century in urban America and the lessons taught and forgotten in the history of racial violence.
Yeah, we milk about 200 head a day. No, couldn't drink a drop. I'm the dairy farmer who couldn't drink milk.
How's his legs?
I think he's okay. My stomach could go crazy. No milk and cookies for Miriam. But then I found this dairy-eased milk. It's great. Finally, I can enjoy real milk like anybody else. Even the cows seem to respect me more.
And to enjoy other dairy products, try Dairy Ease tablets. We Americans have some very particular ideas of what we want in our cars and trucks.
I feel like the car's like wrapped around.
One company gets input from customers at every stage of new product development to find out exactly what they're looking for. That may be why 5 of the top 10 selling vehicles in America are built by the same company, Ford Motor Company.
With your help, our quality gets better all the time.
Ford Motor Company. Quality is job one. It's working.
The people and the press agree. Gaston Caperton is our best choice. He inherited a mess. State government was millions in debt, yet he restored solvency and honesty. Senator Rockefeller credits Caperton for making a really tough decisions and getting us back on course. Caperton's work is paying off. New businesses, new industries, new jobs. That's why Senator Byrd says he's voting for Caperton. Honest to the core, a proven leader, a successful businessman who cares about West Virginia. Gaston Caperton, governor. Let's not turn back now.
America loves its body. America loves its shine. America loves its scent. Loves it every time. America loves its flag.
Millions of women in a shampoo and conditioner called Flex. Revlon Flex. For 20 years, the shampoo and conditioner millions of women love and use. And that means millions of kids, men, and families love Flex too.
America loves its flag.
Chili's has discovered how to make an onion blossom. Remember, we are professionals. Don't try this at home. Chili's Awesome Blossom, a huge onion, battered, flour-looking appetizer thing. Only at Chili's.
Bobby was different and kept it a secret. His mother told him it was a sin, but he couldn't change, so Bobby killed himself. Watch 2020 Friday.
Urban America has learned the hard way that racial rage does not take place in a vacuum, nor does it lie dormant after its first eruption. If there is a sense of unease after the explosion in South Central Los Angeles, blame it on history.
Oh, look at that. Terrible. And there's no police.
The scenes by now are all too familiar. The violence, the anger, the bloodshed, and the senseless destruction of property. What has also become only too familiar is the analysis, linking, as this report does, the mob spirit and its murderous manifestations to the bitter race feelings that had grown up between the whites and the blacks. If that sounds just a little off-key, a tiny bit dated, You're right. The quote comes from an analysis written in 1918 by a group of experts commissioned by Congress to study the riots of 1917 in East St. Louis and to draft a report. At least 47 people died in the riots of 1917. Almost all of them were black. Hallister Kennedy witnessed what happened when he was a boy.
The next day, when all the black men went to work, a riot started, and I was 9 years old at the time, and news came that they were beating up the blacks downtown.
The commission, appointed by Congress, filed its report blaming bitter race feelings. A year later, in 1919, there was another attack by white mobs on blacks in Chicago. This time, 38 people were killed, and this time it was the governor of Illinois who ordered the formation of a commission to study the problem. In this instance, blacks were actually included on the commission, and the report made some progressive recommendations, urging changes in the way that blacks are treated. But Chicago officials ignored the items on changing the social agenda and focused only on beefing up the police force. Harlem, 1935. What turned out later to have been a false rumor swept through the black New York neighborhood. The rumor involved a charge of police brutality. There was an outbreak of violence in which businesses were targeted and at least 2 people were killed. Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia appointed a commission. That commission issued a report which was quite profound and sensitive to black concerns. It urged addressing discrimination in employment, welfare, and health care. The report was never released to the public. Its recommendations were ignored. Detroit, 1943. Whites attacked a black neighborhood. 31 people were killed, almost all of them black. The governor of Michigan appointed a commission. Once again, the report identifies social problems and makes appropriate recommendations, which were ignored. What was identified publicly was the problem of law and order. Then came the 60s, the worst decade of the century in terms of racial disorder. Watts in 1965. For 6 scorching days in August, there is rioting and killing and looting in the predominantly black Los Angeles neighborhood. The spark that set it all off? The arrest of a black man accused of drunk driving. California Governor Pat Brown appoints a commission. It focuses on the need for more law enforcement, but there are also recommendations for new housing and health care facilities, which are actually built in Watts. But the embers of social unrest, of black discontent, are still smoldering in ghettos across the country. Sparks jumped from city to city, igniting violence in 1966 and 1967, from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and some 50 cities in between. In what seems like a masochistic rage, blacks set fire to their own neighborhoods, and over the 2 summers, some 80 people died. By the time Martin Luther King is assassinated in 1968, the racial atmosphere is already ripe with tension. Violence breaks out in 125 cities. 46 people are killed. Property damage is enormous. And throughout, there are more commissions, more reports. By far the most significant, perhaps the most thoughtful report ever drafted on civil disorder in this country was what came to be known as the Kerner Commission Report, named after the former governor of Illinois who headed the investigative body. One of the first witnesses to testify before the Kerner Commission was the distinguished black scholar Kenneth B. Clark. I read that report of the 1919 riot in Chicago, said Dr. Clark, and it is as if I were reading the report of the investigating committee on the Harlem riot of 35, the report of the investigating committee on the Detroit riot of 43, the report of the McCone Commission on the Watts riot. I must again in candor say to you members of this commission, it is a kind of Alice in Wonderland with the same moving picture re-shown over and over again. The same analysis, the same recommendations, and the same inaction.
If you look back over the history of riot commissions that have studied situations in different cities, you find that they are predominantly white, they're predominantly men, They're predominantly people who come from the business community or from political office, or they come from elites that are already in power. They're not representative of the larger community. They rarely represent the populations that are actually suffering from the violence and the damage.
We'll have a lot of flurry, we'll have a lot of papers written, we'll have a lot of commissions. In the end, because we're stuck with our ideology and because we are afraid to look at the enormity of our problems will just get more enormous.
One of the brightest, most articulate, and angriest witnesses we had started out by saying 25 years from now, another witness will be testifying before another commission on the same problems. And she was right.
As yet, no commission has been named to study the causes of the riots in south central Los Angeles last week, but that's probably just a matter of time. I'll be back in a moment.
The business climate is so competitive today. Either you give your customer the best possible service, or somebody else will.
We could take you on a vacation you will never forget, but you've got to get through to us first.
AT&T 800 service connects more calls on the first try, and it connects them faster, so more of your customers actually get through.
To us, a single 800 call could be worth thousands of dollars. And if the call doesn't get through, the opportunity is lost.
With the AT&T 800 assurance policy, if something happens and the customers can't get through, we'll reroute those calls to any working phone in 30 minutes. Guaranteed.
We chose AT&T because our 800 service is our front door, and we want it open to anyone, anywhere who's thinking about a vacation.
When you consider that every call is a customer, why would you want anything less than the most reliable 800 service?
If you want to win in the 21st century, you have to play the service game and play it really well.
We can make a difference. AT&T. Call us.
I'm the youngest guy in the office. I've been there the shortest time, yet I'm the only one who got an Eagle Talon for a company car.
Wow, the boss must think a lot of you.
Dad? Yeah.
That's my girl. She's extremely pleased with me for getting this newly designed Eagle Talon.
She's beautiful.
We think so.
Each year, corporate America spends over $10 billion on overnight shipping. Yet according to a report in the Wall Street Journal, $3 billion of that is wasted. If you find that kind of inefficiency alarming, call UPS. We can save you up to 40% on overnight deliveries and help prevent your profits from going up in smoke. UPS. We run the tightest ship in the shipping business.
On the next Good Morning America, the healthy man. How does stress affect the body and mind?
Then an interview with Robert Redford and a song from Carly Simon on Good Morning America.
Tomorrow night on 2020, whistleblowers speak out, charging that the Air Force's new transport could spell fiscal disaster, costing billions of taxpayer dollars. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been Nightline. If you wish a video cassette version of Nightline, the cost is $14.98, plus $3.95 shipping and handling. If you wish a printed transcript of this or any Nightline broadcast, please send $4 to 1535 Grant Street, Denver, Colorado, 80203.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
Sexual harassment on the job. It can happen to anyone. It can happen to you.
You want to do it before